Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Katie and today we are going beyond the box. If you're new here and don't know what that is, basically if I like the supplies enough in a subscription box to think they've got some use beyond the box and other projects, then that's what I do. And it happens that the January UpCrate box had some good materials in there and plenty of usability beyond the prompts. Maybe I should call it that. I particularly liked the mid-tone paper that came in this. I thought it was quite a nice base colour for portraits. And by combining it with materials I've already got in anyway, I thought this would make a lovely partnership for another drawing. So it's not very often I do this, but you are seeing the development stage of this portrait I'm drawing. A lot of the time I will map things out with circles, so where the mouth is, where the nose is and where the eyes are, the main facial features are done with circles. For me that kind of helps me to get things into some sort of proportion. Sometimes I will do a central line down the face and add in lines where the eyes and the nose and the mouth will go. And sometimes I will just go straight in there with the circles and eyeball it. I thought I would best mention what that strange little gadget was that I did the circle with. So I hate using a compass sometimes. Sometimes I don't want a hole stabbed in the paper, especially if there is a potential that I will be using a wet medium over it. The ink or watercolour or whatever I'll use will just sit in that hole and make it a million times worse. I got the gadget, I think I got it off Groupon actually, maybe Groupon or Wish, couple of years ago, and it's not amazingly stable. I do have to stick a bit of kneadable eraser in there to stop it from sliding around the page quite as much. However, if I want to draw a circle in somewhere without stabbing the paper, then that's not a bad little option. Anyway, now we've got the old sketcheroo out the way with, let's talk a little bit more about these materials. So if you watch the UpCrate unboxing, and if not, be sure to check that out after this video. We had some gorgeous inks which called to my very soul to use them again, as well as some metal tipped calligraphy tools which I found a little bit hard. I did settle on one nib, which is the one I'm using now, and I can't for the life of you tell you what it is because the writing is too small and the metal is too shiny to read it, but it was one of the little nibs. That's the one I had the least trouble with, I think, on the unboxing video, so I stuck to my guns and kept it on this one, and it wasn't too bad. It was still a little bit scratchy but not terrible and alright to use actually. It held the ink for a semi-decent amount of time too. I also thought this picture would be a good way to practice drawing more swirly lines and get a little bit more comfortable with using these unusual tips, which I'll be honest I haven't used before. I told you all about the glass nibs last time. I do like with these, however, that when you add a little bit of pressure whilst drawing, it does make the line a little bit thicker. Obviously it splits the nib ever so slightly and we'll get all sciencey here. The tension from the water still maintains that gap and allows the ink to flow through. See, bit of science there. But it does give a nice variation of lines which I can appreciate. The ink that I used as well was the brown one to do all the outlining, and I'll be really honest with you, I actually thought it was the black one. The text on the bottles telling you which colour's which is very small, and the bottles are all a brown glass, so it's very hard to tell what colour's in there apart from the red. You can tell that one, but between the brown and the black ink there was no telling it unless I actually read the label, and who's got time for that, right? Okay, it was a little accident on my part, but I actually don't hate it. I kind of like it because I do include black ink on this, and it's just nice to have that difference between the areas I used in black and the areas I did in the outlines. And of course it was very complimentary for adding the shading in as well. Now eventually I do succumb to using some thin brushes for the details there. I didn't see the point in using a thick brush because it is only on A5 paper. And it kind of allowed me to dilute this ink a little bit and work in layers in a nice even manner, and also add in those hair tones as well. Now, I really enjoyed working on toned paper when I did the unboxing, and obviously whilst I'm doing this one now. I think there's something quite lovely, especially when you're using a similar colour scheme to the paper. It feels like you're actually carving the image out. I know that you're going to have to sort of visualise this with me. And I'm using the brush with the ink on it to sort of carve deeper, which is why we've got darker areas, and obviously areas where I haven't carved into as much are the lighter areas. I don't know why it is, but I feel like I'm carving a relief out of this, but obviously I physically aren't, and I'm using ink, not carving tools. I also feel like I'm waffling a little bit here, but I'm sure you know what I'm on about. Anyway, it has kind of got me thinking, and maybe I perhaps want to try this a little bit more with a few other toned papers. I have found recently in my stash that I have some of the grey version of this paper, so it would be quite nice to do a monochromatic, just black and white one using similar techniques. I might use a different ink this time. But yes, going back to what I said, it just does feel like I'm kind of carving into it, especially when I'm just at this stage with it. One of my favourite parts of painting portraits is the hair, and I always find that to just add a few lines in at a time and gradually build it up. Obviously, you're going to have to take into consideration how glossy you want the hair to look and the various wave patterns there are in hair. The direction the hair falls as well, and even though it could fall in one direction, not all hair is going to sit straight, and I think for me anyway, when I'm drawing hair, it's nice to have a few of those strands or a slight change of direction. So the areas that I'm doing now on the top of the head, you've got some which are sort of prominently going one way and another going slightly a different way. Does that make any sense? I also think it makes a piece more interesting to look at and less flat. It gets the eye to wander around the piece rather than just focusing on one area, which I think is something that you kind of want people to do. You really want people to look at your artwork, especially if you've put a lot of time into it. And I also think as well, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So I go over and over and over again and make some areas of the hair a little bit darker on sections whilst not on others. Again, that's just to give an illusion of light reflecting on it, or there being a more subtle wave which isn't quite as apparent as the ones in the foreground. I never used to be great at drawing hair, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of my practice has come from my younger days drawing a lot of manga and anime, and I used to be fascinated by how flowy hair would look. Now obviously I emulated what I was reading and watching at the time, and eventually, especially when I went to live drawing, I would concentrate a lot on drawing the hair. Obviously this is a very stylised drawing I've got here, but the same principles can be carried across if you're wanting to do something a little more realistic as well. Anyway, I think I've spoken about the hair quite enough. It's time to start adding some tonal details on the face. I started off by using a very diluted portion of the ink, and I am going everywhere where I want the shadows to be and where I think they should be as well. I've also added a little bit of the brown on her top lip, because when you look at a face, your top lip is always in shadow compared to your bottom one, as well as shadows around the side of the nose, under the nose, and around her jawline and eye sockets. This is one of the really good things about using a mid-tone paper as well. It's quite easy to overwork a picture sometimes just because you're trying to get that mid-tone on there. For example, if you're using white paper, everything ends up looking grey, and eventually you can't distinguish one area from another, or your contrast might be too high. Mid-tone paper has got you covered there, and it's ideal for this. The only thing I found about this paper, and I even said it on the UpCrate video, was it went slightly darker when it was wet, and you couldn't really tell what was really on your paper until it had dried, especially with such a diluted colour. It's time to add the red on the lips and then work on the background. And this is where I discovered that I had done the outlining in brown and not in black. I know. but when they're right up against each other, it is actually quite obvious. If I'd just done this picture with just one of those inks and it had been the brown one, I don't think you would have really known. You probably would have assumed two colours were on there, but as soon as I put that black down, yeah, it did make things stand out. And I'm actually kind of glad as well that I accidentally used the brown ink to outline everything. And whilst I was using that ink, I thought I'll just add a bit more shadow in her eyes before moving on to using a white woodless colour pencil just to add in some very subtle highlights across the skin. This was also followed up by using a white gel pen because I really love how that'll stand out on this coloured paper. I went on to finish the background with the black ink, and I wish I'd used a bigger brush for that, but we've all fallen into that trap before. Now, I kind of think this is quite a subtle painting, so I thought we'll add a subtle bit of sparkle on there. I used the Kuretake metallic paints and I picked the most similar gold to the same colour on the paper. I just wanted it to be one of those things that just caught your eye at the right angle, and I think I matched it up pretty well actually. And I added a little bit on her necklace too. Anyway, thank you for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this. It's been fun sharing what else I've done with this box with you guys. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button. There should be more videos on screen, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!